morning, class. I am here to review your questions for Act 4 of Hamlet, and let's jump right into it. Shabsy asks, he being Hamlet, is obviously not being held by pirates, as he wouldn't have been able to send the letters if he was. So why tell Horatio, the only person he can really trust he is? So let's address that first. So when Hamlet was sent to England, he had told his mother that the letters were sealed, right? Hamlet is aware that there are letters. These letters are written by, dictated by Claudius, and Claudius is sending them along with Hamlet and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to England to give to the King of England. So the King of Denmark is sending letters to the King of England, right? Hamlet is ahead of this. He knows this, okay? Hamlet has gotten a hold of these letters and he has changed them. So let's start there. You don't know exactly why yet because he says it in the next act, so I'm going to hold off on that. But Hamlet changes the plan around, and that starts with those letters, okay? So Hamlet gets to England, and he almost immediately comes right back, right? So he tells Horatio about the pirates. Now, again, this is mostly a theory because there's not a whole lot of text here. But he tells Horatio that, pirates have brought him back and that he owes them or something, right? So chances are highly likely that once Hamlet got away in England, he hired pirates to bring him back. Okay, so that's likely. You have to keep in mind something too. Hamlet is a prince. Every single thing he wears, every single thing he carries is worth a lot more money than almost anybody else has. Okay, so if he's able to bring these things to pirates and say, hey, listen, guys, if you give me a lift, you can have all this expensive stuff, chances are likely they're going to give him a lift back. Okay, now, as for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, you're going to have to wait for Act 5 to see what happens there. Second, why does it seem like nobody cares about people dying? They just brush off Polonius' murder and Ophelia's death like it has no significance. So let's keep in mind something else, too. These are politicians, very rich politicians. They are surrounded by war and murder pretty regularly throughout the course of their lives, as politicians are kind of sort of like that now. I don't think it's that they don't care. Polonius is something that they have to cover up, and quickly, because Polonius is now basically a dead body with no murderer in the castle with the king. Okay, if the people of the kingdom figure this out, that's going to cause a big problem because they're going to want to know, why is there a dead body in the castle and nobody's accountable for it? Number one. Number two, they have to be careful when it comes to Hamlet, because if they were to kill Hamlet or execute Hamlet as a result of this crime, what you're saying is that you're about to take out a prince that is treated like a rock star by the entire kingdom. So that isn't really going to work either. And Claudius makes mention of that, about how people are going to respond emotionally in regards to their love of Hamlet and not realistically to the actual crime itself. Okay, so they're doing everything that they can to kind of brush this under the rug as quickly as possible. So if they care, if they're grieving, even if they're grieving, which I don't think Claudius grieves very much, but if they're grieving, they have to get it over with pretty quickly. And Ophelia's death, I don't think it's that Ophelia's death has no significance. I could see why you'd say that when it comes to the way Claudius addresses it, because Claudius only cares about Claudius, okay? And he has done a pretty decent job masking that for the people around him, for the most part, except for Hamlet. But at this point, Ophelia's death is just raising an entirely new inconvenience for Claudius, because now Laertes is double angry about what's going on, okay? Because now Laertes has lost his entire family, okay? And something terrible has gone on while Laertes has been gone, okay? All he knows is that he just came home to a dead father, and he's not home for 30 minutes, and now his sister is gone, okay? So, again, if you're following Claudius, you're gonna see, it's gonna seem like nobody cares, but wait till the next act. You're gonna see how Ophelia's death really plays out. Brianna, also, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are aware of Claudius's intentions of killing Hamlet. Oh, she's asking, are they aware of it? I'm not sure that they are or are not aware, but the one thing that is definitely going on is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are starting to kiss up to the king more. And I think you can see that evolution throughout the play. When they first show up, it's like they don't really want to be there. They're not even sure why they're there. This is somebody they grew up with, they don't really talk to anymore, and now they've sort of been dragged into this. The longer they're forced to stay there, and the longer Hamlet continuously pushes them away like they don't matter, the easier it is for them to fall in line with the king. You also got to keep in mind something else here, too. The more favors they do for the king, they're kind of starting to realize, oh, we're sort of becoming the king's right-hand men. Like, that means a lot. That means a lot in terms of money, in terms of power, in terms of status. So I don't know if these guys are necessarily bright enough to be thinking that far ahead, but if they're putting their, if they are arranging their priorities in this way, again, I'm not sure that they would care that much or think that far ahead. I mean, quite honestly, with the way their relationship is with Hamlet, would they really care that much to lose Hamlet? I'm not really sure. Yulia. Why didn't Gertrude believe Hamlet about Claudius killing King Hamlet? I realize she's a difficult character to understand, but after finding out that Claudius killed her former husband, why isn't she suspicious of what he could do to Hamlet? How is she still working with Claudius? Well, number one, I'm not sure I could say that she's working with Claudius. I can say that it appears that she loves Claudius for whatever reason. She's fallen in love with him. She did marry him. So the other thing, too, is I think you have to think a little bit about what Gertrude stands to lose in all of this. People would lose respect for her. She would lose her throne. She could lose everything. The entire kingdom could fall apart if we found out the new king murdered his brother to take his wife. So, again, when she tells him, when she throws Hamlet under the bus immediately like that, I'm not sure that she feels like Claudius is going to kill Hamlet, but I think she knows that something needs to happen in order to protect everybody at this point. Because now we've got a lot of really horrible things to cover up, and everybody now has realizing that they have something to lose, depending on how this plays out. After Polonius' secretive murder and funeral, the crowd went wild to have Laertes be the new king. Why didn't they do the same in Hamlet's case? Everyone was suspicious of the former king's death and his brother's quick marriage to the queen as he became king. People loved Hamlet, so why did nobody stand up for him as they did for Laertes? So in Hamlet's case, what happened may have been frowned upon, but it wasn't illegal. And what happened with Polonius, I mean, you're talking about a kingdom that's already looking at the castle kind of like, what's going on up there? And now they've got an old man dead in a closet and nobody seems to be the murderer, right? It's getting worse. Now Laertes shows up and says, they killed my father. Where's my father? I mean, you see Laertes when he walks in the room, he is ready to kill the king dead where he stands. Laertes is not doing what Hamlet is doing. Laertes is mad about the death of his father, and he is responding to that. The people outside the castle who are getting riled up about all this, they see a guy like Laertes walk in, they want justice for Laertes. They think maybe Laertes would be a better choice since nobody else can get the job done. And keep in mind, at that time, Hamlet is not even in the country. Hamlet was sent to England, so he's not even there. What they do know is that if this is true and this is what's really going on and this is how the royal family is going to behave, they don't want Claudius there. So, again, it's just a little bit different. Now, yes, there was a murder in Hamlet and King Hamlet's place, but the people of the kingdom don't know that. So again, they might frown upon it, but as far as they know, nothing illegal happened, so they can complain, but it's not like a riotous, situation. Kayla, the question I have for Act 4 is, does Claudius really think Hamlet is mad, or is he just trying to that he's just trying to protect himself? I would have to say that it's a possibility. It's a little bit of both. Again, that's just my opinion from looking at the text. Claudius has a lot to worry about now. It's been made pretty clear to Claudius that young Hamlet knows the truth about what happened. However, young Hamlet has still not verbally said to Claudius, "You killed my father." So Claudius has a lot to worry about now with young Hamlet. Now the question starts to become, does this guy know what I did? Or is he really crazy? Does he know what I did and he's really crazy? Like, any combination of those things is not going to sit right with Claudius. So Hamlet has got to go. Shelby, one question I have about this act is, did Ophelia fall into the brook by accident, or did she commit suicide? So I just had a long conversation last night with someone about this. So there's a few ways to look at this, I think. Ophelia did die because of, did die by her own hand. Now, whether or not she had the mental faculties to understand what was happening to her is debatable. Technically speaking, she committed suicide because she went out to the brook like that. She fell in. She didn't try to escape. She didn't try to swim out. She just sank to the bottom and never came out again. So that's definitely classified as a suicide. But when we see Ophelia in the state of mind that she's in, we have to ask ourselves, did she know that that's what was happening? Or was she so far gone that she just sank to the bottom and died? So I suppose technically it's a suicide, but it's arguable as to whether or not Ophelia had that intention, I guess, is my point. Mario, I'm confused as to why the whole military arrived, as well as how Claudius got Polonius' son not to kill him. Okay, so Claudius is let's address that first. He's a fast talker. He's a smooth talker. Obviously, he got this far, right? So he is, first off, he immediately puts the blame on Hamlet completely and assures Laertes that he's going to be able to get his revenge. And you can see that at the end of Act 4, and I want you to really pay attention to how Gertrude responds to that, because Gertrude is heartbroken to find out that there's something going on behind the scenes that could hurt her son, it seems. The other part is why the whole military arrived. So Fortinbras is on his way with his military. And when Hamlet is walking back from his trip to England, he crosses with Fortinbras's military. Fortinbras is coming from Norway, and he's on his way to Poland. That is what one of the captains tells Hamlet. Hamlet just basically stops because he's curious about, yeah, what are you guys doing out here? Where are you guys going? And the captain tells him, well, we're going to get some little piece of land from Poland. I'm not even sure why we're going there. I think the real reason they're going is because they're still going to attack Denmark, even though Claudius thinks that this whole thing was called off way earlier in Act 1. Okay, which I always felt like showed Claudius's weakness when it comes to running a government, especially running a military. It's also important, I think, on a side note, to pay attention to how Hamlet responds to running into Fortinbras's military. Fortinbras is also a prince. Fortinbras is also a prince that kind of got his crown pulled out from under him because his uncle is running his country. Fortinbras's father was also murdered by Hamlet's father, King Hamlet. Okay, so Hamlet looks at this army. It's an illegal army that Fortinbras pulled together to go attack out of revenge for his father, mostly. So Hamlet is kind of envious of Fortinbras for a moment. He looks at this guy and he goes, this is a prince. This is a prince with a murdered father. Look what this guy can do. What have I really done? Okay, so that's a really important moment. Let's see, Mason asks, something I understand about Act 4 is Claudius. How can he live on like this and allow himself to commit and do all the things that he's done? That's a great question. Claudius is a villain. He's a villain and he's a sociopath. So, you know, that's who he is. That's his role in life. Brittany's question, why doesn't Claudius fence Hamlet instead of Laertes? So, for starters, I think that you have to consider, first of all, that Claudius is a lot older than Hamlet. Hamlet is going to be a lot more agile than Claudius, first of all. Second of all, Hamlet, I think it's easier to set up something between Hamlet and Laertes because, number one, you don't put the king in that kind of danger. And number two, Hamlet does love Laertes like family. Hamlet feels, it's one of the few things you see in the play that Hamlet feels bad about. He feels bad about how he reacted at Ophelia's funeral. He feels bad about killing Polonius, killing Laertes' father. And that is really the first and only time you see him express that. He doesn't express that grief to really anybody else before then. But he does express it to Laertes. So it is, I think, easier to set that up. It will look more legitimate that way. Abigail's question. One question that I have is, did Ophelia really commit suicide? So I just addressed that a few minutes ago. Something tells me Gertrude might have pushed her in the brook in order to keep her quiet about everything that was going on. So that's a really interesting take. I hear a lot of students think that Gertrude had something to do with Ophelia's death. That's the first time I've ever seen anybody say it was to keep Ophelia quiet, and I think that's a very interesting argument. I'm not sure that you could say definitively that anything like that happened. It is extremely bizarre that Gertrude can explain in such incredible detail how Ophelia died. It makes you wonder, what were you doing while Ophelia was drowning? Were you just standing there? However, again, I don't think there's anything in the text that would say that explicitly. Gertrude does seem pretty torn up by Ophelia's death. So, again. Alec. Why is Ophelia beginning to act more crazy like Hamlet? Is she trying to be like him on purpose? Well, I think what you're seeing here is you're seeing different characters respond to deep grief differently. And I think that's a lot about it has a lot to do with what's going on in Hamlet. You're seeing a lot of young people respond to their grief in different ways. Ophelia, the difference between the way Ophelia is acting is she is 100% authentic. She is 100% behaving the way she's behaving because she really is losing it. I mean, she already doesn't have a mother. Her father was murdered by her lover, and her brother, at least up until that point, was not around. He was all the way in France. That leaves her completely by herself. So the weight of that is really crushing her. Plus, Ophelia doesn't have the same wealth and resources at her fingertips the way Hamlet does. So again, you're just looking at the way different people respond to deep grief. Cameron, the only question that I have for the end of Act 4 is, why did Rosencrantz and Guildenstern stab Hamlet in the back when throughout the majority of the story they seemed like good friends with Hamlet and they seemed to really care about him? I don't know. I don't know if I would say that they cared about Hamlet all that much. I think they were pulled in by the king to spy on Hamlet, and maybe they cared about him a little bit. But I think as the story went on, and I answered this earlier, I think that Hamlet continuously pushed them away because he knew that they weren't there because they wanted to be. And I think that made it easier for them to fall in line with the king more. Again, keep in mind, I don't care who you support. If somebody with a lot of power and a lot of money is suddenly on your side and able to make things happen for you in your life, you might stab some people in the back for that. Maybe you personally wouldn't, but a lot of people would. Emily, one question I have is, I understand Gertrude is Hamlet's mother, but she doesn't seem to be a significant part of this play. Am I missing something, or is she really just there to play the role of his mom and that's it? So I think I would argue that Gertrude does play a pretty big role. I mean, if you think about it, Gertrude's marriage is really what sets off an entire chain of events. I mean, honestly, even the death of Hamlet's father may not have landed as significantly as it did if she didn't get married as soon as she did after. Plus, if you take that scene between Hamlet and his mother when they're alone, that is a hugely significant scene. But the other thing that's going on beneath the surface, I think that you want to think about a little bit, is how little power the women in this story really have. Ophelia doesn't really have any power. She doesn't have control over her own life. Gertrude might be the queen, but she also doesn't have a whole lot of power. And there are some they're quiet moments, but there are moments between Gertrude and Ophelia where you see the two of them look at each other and you just go, wow, Ophelia's not royalty and Gertrude's the queen, and look at the two of them side by side. They have about the same amount of power practically. On their own, they do. They both have to ask someone else for permission and follow someone else's plan. You know, it's very difficult for them to have control over their own lives. So I think there's something to that in the fabric of the way the story is written, too. Let's see. Julia Julia, my burning question would be, why do you think that Gertrude goes running to Claudius with all this new and shocking information about Hamlet instead of trying to help him, especially since she knows that Hamlet hates Claudius? So I addressed this earlier as well. I addressed that, you know, I want you to consider what Gertrude has to lose in all of this. How can Gertrude manipulate this situation and move it around where she can still perhaps protect her son, but also not lose the respect of an entire kingdom and watch the government around her, of which she's a major part of, just completely crumble? So I think that there's something to that. There might be something to the fact that she really does love Claudius despite everything that he's done. Love is a complicated thing like that. So just some things to think about. William, my burning question to ask is, shouldn't Hamlet be jailed for murdering Polonius in cold blood? I know it's based in... Okay, so... Again, let's keep in mind, yeah, if Hamlet was anybody else, that's exactly what would happen. He wouldn't be jailed, he'd probably be executed. Okay, but he's not. He's a prince. He's a prince that's viewed like a rock star. He's a prince that might know that the king killed the previous king. There's a lot of stuff that could really go wrong here. The other thing, too, is if Claudius tries to take out Hamlet, the kingdom, regardless of whether or not Hamlet is guilty, might just turn on Claudius. Because they love Hamlet more than they love him. They love Hamlet more than they love anybody in the castle. So that's, again, just some things to think about. Fabiano, why did his mother betray him? Okay, I just talked about that too. And that's all the questions I have from you guys for this week. So I hope that this cleared some things up, or at the very least, I hope it got you thinking about things a little bit differently. And I will see you all for Act 5.